What if the history you know is not the full story? Before civilization, there may have been something greater. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Story of Humanity. They tell us that human history is a story of progress, from caves to huts, from huts to cities, and from ignorance to science. But what if that story is incomplete? What if, before Mesopotamia and Egypt, there were other civilizations now erased by time, disaster, and silence? For centuries, archaeologists have taught us that civilization began only 6,000 years ago. Yet across the world, from Turkey to Peru, from India to the ocean floor, evidence whispers of something older. Ancient ruins that should not exist, maps that defy history, and myths that sound less like fantasy and more like memory. Tonight, we journey into the forgotten past. We will ask the questions that history books avoid. Were we truly primitive at the dawn of humanity, stumbling in darkness until the first cities were built? Or did ancient advanced civilizations walk this earth long before us, leaving behind clues buried in stone and legend? Consider this: almost every culture, from the Sumerians to the Mayans, from the Aboriginal peoples of Australia to the tribes of North America, speaks of a great flood, a world destroyed and knowledge lost. How could peoples separated by oceans and millennia share the same story? And then there are the monuments, massive structures aligned with the stars, carved with symbols that repeat across continents. The Great Pyramid of Giza points almost perfectly to true north. Stonehenge marks the solstices with an accuracy our ancestors should not have had. In the jungles of Guatemala, Mayan astronomer priests tracked the movements of Venus with precision rivaling our modern calculations. Coincidence, or a hidden legacy? In this film, we will explore the birth of civilization as it is written and the mysteries that suggest another truth. From the caves of early humanity to the great river valleys of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus. From Göbekli Tepe, the world's first temple, to the submerged ruins of forgotten cities. From myths of Atlantis to the repeating symbols carved across the globe. We will weigh archaeology against alternative theories, fact against speculation, and we will search for the forbidden history of humanity, because to understand who we are today, we must uncover what we have forgotten yesterday. This is not just the story of civilization. It is the story of what may have come before civilization. After countless generations of survival in caves and forests, humanity began a transformation. We learned to tame fire, to farm the land, and to build the first villages. This was the true dawn of civilization, a fragile beginning that would shape the world to come. Chapter 2. From Caves to Villages. The Dawn of Civilization. Let us begin at the caves, the supposed cradles of human culture. In places like Lascaux in France, or Chauvet and Altamira in Spain, paintings more than 30,000 years old still glow with astonishing artistry. Herds of bison, horses, and deer painted with perspective, shading, even motion. These were not the crude doodles of primitive people. These were works of imagination, storytelling, and symbolic thought. The human mind was already advanced, capable of abstraction, beauty, and memory. Some researchers believe these cave paintings were more than art. They may have been calendars, star maps, even sacred rituals meant to preserve knowledge. If this is true, then the very first humans we call primitive may have carried within them the seeds of civilization. Then came the shift, the end of the Ice Age, around 12,000 years ago. The earth warmed, glaciers retreated, and rising seas swallowed coastlines. It was during this time that humans began to settle. Villages appeared near rivers and fertile lands. Crops were cultivated, animals were tamed, and for the first time, communities could grow beyond the size of a wandering tribe. Mainstream archaeology teaches us that this transition was gradual, that over thousands of years, necessity gave birth to invention. Clay pots for storage, weaving for clothing, grinding stones for flour. And with stability came population growth, and with population came complexity. But there is a mystery here. Some of the earliest known settlements, such as Jericho in the Levant, are far older and more sophisticated than expected. Archaeological evidence suggests that Jericho was already a walled city as far back as 9000 BC, long before the official dawn of civilization. Why did these people, supposedly fresh out of the Stone Age, build fortifications, towers, and organized communities? What were they protecting themselves against? Another site, Göbekli in modern-day Turkey, dating to 7500 BC, reveals a city with thousands of people, wall paintings, shrines, and complex social structures. The inhabitants lived in houses packed closely together, entered through the roof by ladders, and decorated their walls with images of bulls, goddesses, and geometric designs. This was no village of primitive farmers. It was a proto-city, a center of culture, belief, and possibly trade. These early settlements raise an uncomfortable question. How did humans, supposedly unsophisticated and inexperienced, leap so quickly into advanced social organization? Did knowledge simply appear with agriculture? Was it inherited from an earlier, forgotten age? Consider this. The sudden shift to farming and permanent settlements around 10,000 BC coincides almost exactly with the end of the Ice Age, a time of massive environmental upheaval. Was this just coincidence? Or did survivors of a previous civilization pass down knowledge of farming, construction, and social organization to the so-called primitive tribes who rebuilt the world? Mainstream archaeology says no. It insists that progress was slow, step by step. Yet the evidence at Jericho and Göbekli challenges this narrative. These places appear not as the beginning of a long climb from ignorance, but as the echoes of something already lost. And what of the myths? Across the world, stories tell of a time when the gods or wise ancestors taught humans how to farm, how to build, how to live. In Mesopotamia, the Apkallusamide, vine beings, were said to have given the arts of civilization. In Mesoamerica, the god Quetzalcoatl was remembered as the bringer of agriculture and knowledge. Even in ancient Greece, the Titan Prometheus gave humanity the gift of fire. Are these simply myths? Or faint memories of real teachers, survivors of a forgotten world, who carried fragments of knowledge into a new, shattered age? The dawn of civilization, then, is not a simple story of caves to huts to cities. It is a story riddled with mysteries, leaps, and contradictions. At every turn, the question lingers. Did humanity truly rise from ignorance by itself, or was it guided, helped, perhaps even restarted by something older? As we move forward in our journey, we will leave the caves and villages behind and step into the great river valleys where mainstream history says civilization truly began: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley. But even there, the story is not as straightforward as it seems. History books tell us that true civilization began in the great river valleys Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates, Egypt along the Nile, the Indus Valley in South Asia, and later ancient China. Here we see writing, kings, temples, and the first empires. But even in these so-called cradles of civilization, the story is filled with riddles, contradictions, and unexplained brilliance. Did these cultures rise or were they inheritors of something far older? Chapter 3. The first recognized civilizations: Mesopotamia, Egypt, Indus, and China. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians built the first known cities, Uruk or Eridu, around 3000 BC. They created cuneiform, the world's first writing system. They built ziggurats, towering temples that reached toward the heavens. They mapped the stars, calculated mathematics, and invented laws that still echo in our courts today. But the Sumerians themselves did not claim to be the first. According to their own texts, civilization was given to them by the Apkalosami, divine sages sent by the gods. In the Sumerian king list, we read of antediluvian kings who reigned for thousands of years before the great flood swept them away. Is this mythology or memory of an earlier age, erased by catastrophe? Further west, along the Nile, arose one of the most iconic civilizations, ancient Egypt, with pyramids, hieroglyphs, and pharaohs. Egypt is remembered as a miracle of human ingenuity, but Egypt's own priests told a different story. The historian Herodotus recorded that Egyptian priests claimed their civilization stretched back over 12,000 years. In their own traditions, the god Thoth, master of wisdom, gave humanity writing and knowledge. The god Osiris taught agriculture and law. And then there are the pyramids themselves. The Great Pyramid of Giza, aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree, constructed with over 2 million stones, some weighing 80 tons. Egyptologists say it was built around 2500 BC, using copper tools and wooden sledges. But engineers still debate how such precision was achieved. Even more puzzling, the Sphinx shows signs of water erosion, suggesting it may be thousands of years older than dynastic Egypt, perhaps a remnant of an earlier, lost culture. To the east, in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, lay the Indus Valley civilization, flourishing from 2600 to 1900 BC. It remains one of the least understood of the Great Four. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were laid out on perfect grids, with advanced drainage and sewage systems unmatched until the Romans, thousands of years later. Their houses had bathrooms and running water while much of the world still lived in huts. And yet, the Indus left behind no Rosetta Stone, no deciphered script. Their symbols remain unread, their rulers unknown, their myths forgotten. Who taught these people urban planning on such a scale? Why did their knowledge vanish so completely? In the valleys of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, Chinese civilization took root. By 2000 BC, dynasties rose, recorded history began, and China's culture flourished. They invented bronze casting, silk weaving, and complex philosophies that endure to this day. But even here, myths speak of an earlier time, the legendary Shire dynasty, whose existence remains disputed, and before them, the sage kings said to rule with divine wisdom. One tale tells of Fuxi, the culture hero who taught writing, fishing, and animal domestication. His wife Nua shaped humanity from clay. Ancient texts describe dynasties stretching back tens of thousands of years. Is this exaggeration, or did China, like Egypt and Mesopotamia, preserve faint memories of a world before the flood? When we put these four civilizations side by side, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Indus, and China, we see common themes. Each arose suddenly, fully formed, with writing, architecture, and religion already complex. Each credited gods or ancestors with teaching them the arts of civilization. And each carries stories of floods, lost ages, and wisdom from before recorded history. So the question is clear: were these truly the first civilizations? Or were they inheritors of something much older, something wiped away, leaving only fragments to seed new societies? Archaeology tells us that before 3000 BC, humans were simple farmers. But the monuments, myths, and mysteries suggest a different story, that knowledge was passed down, preserved through disaster, remembered in stone and legend.
Mainstream history tells us that civilization began about 6,000 years ago in the Great River Valleys. But scattered across the earth are sites that refuse to fit into that neat story. They are older, stranger, and more advanced than they should be. They suggest that long before Mesopotamia or Egypt, human beings were building, carving, and organizing in ways that defy explanation. Let us travel to the hills of southeastern Turkey, to a place that rewrote history, Göbekli Tepe. In 1994, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt uncovered massive stone pillars arranged in circles, buried beneath a hill near Şanlıurfa, Turkey. At first glance, they looked like the ruins of a Bronze Age temple. But when dated, they stunned the world. 11,000 years old, more than twice as old as Stonehenge, older than agriculture itself. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe stand up to 20 feet tall and weigh up to 20 tons. They are carved with animals, lions, scorpions, vultures, snakes, etched with detail that rivals later civilizations. And yet, according to history books, humans at this time were still nomadic hunter-gatherers, supposedly incapable of such planning or engineering. So how did they do it? Who organized hundreds of people to quarry, carve, and move these stones? What ceremonies took place in these great stone circles, centuries before the wheel, before pottery, before farming? Even more mysterious, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8000 BC. Who buried it, and why? Was it an attempt to preserve knowledge, a ritual closure, or the final act of a fading civilization, covering its sacred site before vanishing into history? Göbekli Tepe proves one thing beyond doubt: advanced organization, artistry, and monument building existed thousands of years before we thought possible. If one such site existed, how many more lie, buried under soil and sand? Not far away, still in Anatolia, lies another puzzle: Çatalhöyük. Flourishing around 7,500 BC, it may have been the world's first true city. Thousands of people lived here in houses packed closely together, with no streets. They entered their homes by climbing down ladders through roof openings. The people of Çatalhöyük decorated their walls with murals of hunting scenes, animals, and geometric symbols. Shrines contained bull skulls and goddess figurines, suggesting a complex religious life. There is evidence of trade, agriculture, and a community that lasted for more than 1,000 years. But why here, and why then? According to the standard model, people were only just beginning to farm around this time. Yet at Çatalhöyük, we see a level of organization and culture that feels sudden, almost as if knowledge appeared rather than evolved. Some scholars suggest Çatalhöyük was not the first, but the last echo of an earlier tradition, descendants of survivors who rebuilt with knowledge handed down. Its art, religion, and social structures may have been fragments of something greater, now lost to us. To the south, near the Jordan River, stands Jericho, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth. Archaeological digs reveal that Jericho had defensive walls and a stone tower as early as 9000 BC. That is nearly 4,000 years before the pyramids. Why would a supposedly primitive settlement need walls and towers? Who were they defending against? These questions remain unanswered. The construction itself is puzzling. The Tower of Jericho was 28 feet high, built from stone blocks weighing hundreds of pounds. Building such a structure requires planning, coordination, and social hierarchy, things mainstream history says should not have existed yet. Jericho stands as proof that humans organized into complex communities far earlier than we are told. It forces us to reconsider the entire story of civilization. When we place Göbekli Tepe, Cataluyuk, and Jericho side by side, the official story begins to crumble. These sites are too advanced, too early, too organized. They suggest that humanity was not stumbling blindly into civilization, but remembering rebuilding based on knowledge carried from before. And when we recall that this era coincides with the end of the Ice Age, a time of catastrophic floods, rising seas, and mass extinctions, another picture emerges. Perhaps survivors of a lost civilization preserved their traditions in places like Anatolia and the Levant. Perhaps the first temples and cities were not beginnings at all, but restarts after a global disaster. These are not just ruins. They are reminders that human history is deeper and more mysterious than we imagine. If advanced communities existed before Mesopotamia, how far back does civilization truly go? Our next step takes us from archaeology to mythology. For across the world, stories of great floods, golden ages, and lost lands may hold clues to civilizations now vanished beneath the sea. Could myths of Atlantis, Lemuria, and other lost worlds be more than fiction? Could they be memories of real places, erased from the map, but not from our collective memory?
Every culture has myths. They are said to be stories, fantasies, ways to explain the world before science. But what if some myths are not fiction at all? What if they are memories, echoes of real events preserved through oral tradition for thousands of years? Across the globe, myths tell of floods, golden ages, and lost lands swallowed by the sea. And in nearly every case, these stories share uncanny similarities, as though humanity itself remembers a chapter of history erased from the record. The flood myth is one of the most widespread on Earth. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians told of Ziusudra, warned by the gods to build a great boat before a deluge destroyed humanity. Later, the Babylonians wrote of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, who survived a divine flood with his family and animals. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah builds his ark, saving life from 40 days of rain. In Hindu tradition, the god Vishnu appears as a fish, warning Manu of a flood that would destroy the world. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs spoke of sun's world ages destroyed by water. Even in Australia, Aboriginal legends describe rising seas swallowing once inhabited coastal lands. How can so many cultures, separated by oceans, tell the same story? Modern science confirms that around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age, glaciers melted rapidly, sea levels rose by more than 400 feet, drowning coastlines and reshaping continents. Entire land masses were swallowed by the sea. Is this the Great Flood remembered in myth? Perhaps the most famous lost civilization is Atlantis. First described by the Greek philosopher Plato around 360 BC, Atlantis was said to be a great island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, today's Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato, Atlantis was highly advanced, with magnificent architecture, canals, and technology. But in a single day and night of catastrophe, it sank into the sea. Scholars insist Atlantis was an allegory, a story to teach lessons about pride and corruption. Yet generations have wondered, what if Plato's story was based on memory? Some point to the volcanic destruction of Thera Santorini as inspiration. Others suggest connections to the Minoans, a highly advanced Bronze Age culture. But could Atlantis be even older a civilization from before the flood, remembered dimly by survivors? If Plato's tale has even a grain of truth, it suggests that an entire culture, more advanced than we admit, may have vanished, leaving behind only legend. In the 19th century, scientists proposed a lost continent in the Indian Ocean to explain similarities in flora and fauna. They called it Lemuria. Though later dismissed, the idea spread into mythology and spiritual traditions, becoming a symbol of a vanished ancient homeland. Similarly, some South American myths speak of a great land to the east that disappeared beneath the ocean. Polynesian legends recall islands swallowed by the sea. Even in Japan, the Yonaguni Monument submerged structures off Okinawa has fueled speculation about a sunken civilization. Skeptics say these are coincidences, natural formations, or exaggerations, but when we combine them with the scientific reality of rising seas after the Ice Age, the possibility grows stronger. Perhaps entire cultures once lived on coasts, now buried underwater. If so, our map of human history is incomplete. Flood myths are not the only recurring story. Many cultures remember a golden age, a time when gods or ancestors walked among humans, when knowledge and harmony flourished. The Greeks spoke of the age of Kronos. The Hindus describe Satya Yuga, the first and purest age of the world cycle. The Egyptians told of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods ruled on earth and built the first temples. Are these simply myths of longing for a better past or faint memories of a real civilization, one that thrived before catastrophe ended it? Mainstream historians dismiss these stories as imagination, but science is beginning to confirm their roots. Geological evidence of massive floods, ancient coastlines now underwater, and mysterious ruins suggest myths may be historical records encoded in story. If that is true, then myths are not lies, they are messages. They tell us that humanity has faced disaster before, and that advanced cultures may have risen and fallen long before Mesopotamia and Egypt. Perhaps our ancestors were not warning us of divine punishment, but of natural cycles and fire, flood and famine that erase civilizations from the earth. And perhaps they were also trying to preserve fragments of lost knowledge, hidden in story and symbol, waiting for us to understand. Long before nations, before writing, before time itself was measured, humanity spoke a silent language, carved in stone, painted in caves, carried across oceans and ages. The same symbols appear again and again: the spiral, the serpent, the sun, with a decoration or communication. Perhaps these shapes are more than art. Perhaps they are memory, the oldest language of all. One of the oldest and most universal symbols is the spiral. In Newgrange, Ireland, spirals are carved into megalithic stones dating back 5,000 years. In the American Southwest, native peoples painted spirals on canyon walls. In Peru, the Nazca people etched spirals into the desert floor. In Polynesia, Maori tattooed spirals onto skin as marks of lineage. The spiral is everywhere. It mirrors galaxies in the sky, whirlpools in water, the coils of shells, even the double helix of DNA. Did ancient people across the world independently notice the spiral as a natural form? Or was it taught, a symbol of cycles, eternity, and cosmic order, preserved from a forgotten wisdom? Another universal symbol slithers through myth and stone, the serpent. In Egypt, the cobra crowned pharaohs as the uraeus symbol of divine power. In India, Nagas serpent beings guarded treasures and wisdom. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was worshipped as the bringer of knowledge and agriculture. Even in Norse mythology, Jarmungandr, the world serpent, encircled the earth itself. Why does the serpent appear everywhere? To some, it represents danger, death, temptation. To others, it is renewal, wisdom, rebirth, the shedding of skin. Could the serpent have been more than myth? Was it an ancient code, a symbol for cosmic cycles, hidden knowledge, or even the guardians of secrets passed down through ages? The sun has always been humanity's great power. Without it, there is no life. And so it appears in symbols across cultures. In Egypt, the Otten sun Disquaz, worshipped as divine. In Inca culture, Inti, the sun god, gave legitimacy to rulers. In Japan, Amaterasu, the sun goddess, was the ancestor of emperors. Native Americans carved solar crosses. In Europe, Bronze Age discs represented the sun's journey. But beyond worship, the sun's path was tracked with precision. Stonehenge in England, Chaco Canyon in the United States, pyramids in Mexico and Egypt all aligned to solstices and equinoxes. Why were ancient people obsessed with the sun's cycles? Was it merely agricultural necessity, or did they inherit astronomical knowledge, warning of greater cycles, perhaps even catastrophes tied to the heavens? The human eye appears again and again as a sacred symbol. In Egypt, the eye of Horus represented healing, protection, and cosmic order. In the Middle East, the Nazar blue eye charms warded off evil. In Mesoamerica, depictions of eyes within symbols appear in carvings. Even in Buddhism, the third eye represents spiritual vision. Why would cultures across continents elevate the eye as divine? Was it simply because the eye is central to human experience? Did it symbolize an inner sight, a vision beyond the physical world? Today, the eye remains powerful, found even on the US dollar bill as the all-seeing eye. Could it be that ancient symbols still shape our world, carried unconsciously from civilizations long past? Symbols, myths, ruins together. They suggest humanity has a deeper memory than we admit. If these are fragments of an ancient code, who created it? Were they our ancestors, smarter and more advanced than we believe, another civilization entirely? To answer this, we must return to archaeology. For even in the great ruins of known civilizations, evidence remains that does not fit the official story. Artifacts out of place, technologies ahead of their time, and monuments that seem impossible with the tools of their age. These are the forbidden questions that challenge history itself. History, as it is taught, is a neat story, but scattered around the world are objects and structures that simply do not fit. They are called opats, out-of-place artifacts. To some, they are curiosities. To others, they are evidence of a much older, more advanced civilization, one that mainstream archaeology prefers to ignore. In 1513, the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis created a world map using older source charts. On it, he drew the coastlines of Africa, South America, and most mysteriously Antarctica. How could a 16th century map show Antarctica, centuries before it was officially discovered? Even more puzzling, the coastline is drawn without ice. resembling the landmass beneath as revealed only by modern satellite and seismic surveys. Was Piri Reis copying knowledge from an ancient source? Perhaps a map created thousands of years earlier, when Antarctica's coasts were ice-free. If so, who could have mapped it? In Iraq, clay jars dating back 2,000 years were discovered with copper cylinders and iron rods inside. Some believe these Baghdad batteries could generate small electrical charges. In Greece, a corroded bronze device was pulled from a shipwreck near Antikythera, dated to 100 BC. It is a complex system of gears, capable of predicting eclipses and planetary movements. Often called the first computer, it was far beyond what we thought the ancients could build. If devices like these survived, how much ancient technology has been lost to time? Everywhere we look, we find stones that seem impossible to move with primitive tools. At Baalbek in Lebanon, the trilithon stones weigh more than 800 tons if yet were cut, moved, and placed into a massive platform. Even modern cranes would struggle with such a feat. In Egypt, obelisks were carved from single pieces of granite and transported miles from their quarries. In South America, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Peru is built of stones, cut so precisely that not even a blade of grass fits between them. Some weigh over 100 tons, yet they are stacked like children's blocks, without mortar. How were such feats achieved? Copper chisels and ropes seem inadequate explanations. Could lost techniques or lost technologies be at work? In the Peruvian desert, massive geoglyphs stretch for miles. The Nazca lines, figures of hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, and geometric shapes are etched into the ground. From above, they are unmistakable. From the ground, they are nearly invisible. How did ancient people create such vast images without aerial perspective? Were they ritual pathways, astronomical markers, or messages to the sky? The mystery of the Nazca lines endures. And they remind us, ancient people were capable of projects we still struggle to explain. Beyond artifacts and monuments, knowledge itself can be out of place. The Mayans tracked Venus with uncanny precision. The Dogon people of Mali described the invisible star Sirius B centuries before telescopes. Ancient Indian texts speak of Vimanized flying machines, powered by engines, described in technical detail. Are these coincidences, poetic metaphors, or glimpses of advanced knowledge passed down from an earlier age? Skeptics dismiss opopharts as misunderstandings, hoaxes, or exaggerations, and certainly some are, but to many remain unexplained. Why are they ignored? Perhaps because they threaten the accepted timeline. To admit such evidence might mean rewriting the history books, conceding that civilization is older, more advanced, and more cyclical than we believe. For mainstream archaeology, the story is simple. Humans rose from savagery to civilization, step by step. But forbidden artifacts suggest another story: a rise, a fall, and perhaps a rise again. These forbidden artifacts and impossible monuments do not prove a lost civilization, but they point to the possibility. They are breadcrumbs on the trail of a forgotten chapter. And if such a civilization once existed, destroyed by catastrophe, then the question is not only what knowledge was lost, but what knowledge was deliberately hidden. To find answers, we must return to the human story. For even as archaeology digs into the ground, myths and traditions speak of hidden ages, cycles of time, and warnings for the future. Perhaps the ancients were not just remembering their past, but preparing us for ours. When we look at history as it is taught, the story is clear. Civilization began 6,000 years ago. It has been a story of progressively, steady, unstoppably leading from primitive huts to skyscrapers, from stone tools to space travel. But when we weave together the close ancient myths of floods, ruins older than they should be, forbidden artifacts, and symbols shared across the globe, emerges. Perhaps we are not the first civilization. Perhaps we are only the latest. Nature itself moves in cycles. The earth spins, the seasons change, the moon waxes and wanes. Why should human history be any different? In Hindu tradition, time is divided into yugas, ages that repeat again and again, from golden ages of wisdom to dark ages of ignorance. The Maya described sun's worlds that rose and fell in succession. Plato wrote of great cycles of destruction by fire and flood. What if civilizations to rise, fall, and rise again, each leaving behind fragments for the next, each building on ruins half remembered, each believing itself to be the first and the greatest? Consider how fragile our own world truly is. In a matter of weeks, a natural disaster, a war, or a global collapse could erase the infrastructures we take for granted. Cities would fall silent. Satellites would burn out. Records stored digitally would vanish. Within centuries, only ruins would remain. If our civilization collapsed today, what would be remembered 10,000 years from now? Would our descendants know of airplanes and computers? Or would they find only scattered relics, misinterpret them, and call us primitive? If advanced civilizations did exist before, what lessons did they leave us? Perhaps they tried to warn us through myths telling of floods and disasters, not as divine punishment, but as natural cycles that erase even the greatest empires. Perhaps symbols carved into stone spirals, suns, serpents were not just art, but codes of cosmic cycles, reminders of forces greater than ourselves. And perhaps monuments aligned with stars were not simply calendars, but messages to watch the heavens, to mark time, to prepare for the next turning of the wheel. Maybe we are not the first. Maybe we are the inheritors, survivors of a forgotten age, carrying fragments of memory into a new dawn. If so, our achievements are not entirely our own. They are part of a chain stretching back into the unknown, linking us to civilizations lost beneath the waves or buried beneath the sand. And if this is true, then our responsibility is greater. For if cycles of rise and fall are real, then we too are vulnerable. We too could be swept away, leaving only myths for the future. The question is not just academic. It challenges our very identity. Are we truly the pinnacle of history, or just one chapter in a book, much longer than we imagine? Mainstream archaeology says no, but the stones, the myths, the artifacts whisper otherwise. They tell us humanity has walked this path before. Others have risen, built wonders, mapped the stars, and fallen. If we are wise, we will listen. If we are arrogant, we may repeat their fate.